Hello, and welcome to the Bloodstream Podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media, and made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I'm your patient advocate and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your healthcare advocate, nonprofit nerd, and your other host, Amy Board, reminding you to please speak with the treatment professional? Nope, healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions.
Well, I guess in a certain light, the treatment professionals, if you're in the middle of a treatment conversation,
maybe they should change their names to treatment professionals.
So we'll recommend that to the IST. Never mind. Anyway, on today's show.
That was a great burn.
Thank you. HFA's Mild Matters program. What is it? What is it accomplishing? And where is it going? We speak with Shellye Horowitz about all of that. The latest and final installment of the Elite Athletes with Hemophilia segment features Paul McLaughlin, which I like that.
I do too.
That's the upside. Downside is it's coming to an end. Upside is it finishes with Paul. And we have the latest in our I'm Fine segment. All of that and more on today's episode. Welcome to Bloodstream.
Listeners, as always, thank you for joining us today. And if you like what you hear, please share this episode on social media or subscribe.
Tons of great ideas in there, Amy. I am going to remind listeners that the Bloodstream Podcast is indeed made possible by our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Yes, that's right. Takeda has got this website, bleedingdisorders.com, where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. Takeda believes in a world free of bleeds.
Which is great.
I think so, too.
It's a great thing.
And they are dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support, including this podcast, to help patients throughout their treatment journey, wherever on that journey you may be, and you can learn more by simply visiting bleedingdisorders.com. One more time, although, do you need this? bleedingdisorders.com. And for their founding and ongoing support of the Bloodstream Podcast, I would just like to say, thanks, Takeda.
Thank you, Takeda.
And thanks as well to segment sponsor Sanofi for supporting the Elite Athletes and I'm Fine segments.
Yes.
I actually had with me, it's in my bag. Let's see. I'm going to reach for props. This might be the first time I've ever reached for a prop.
Oh my gosh.
I don't even know if I have it.
I can't believe you even brought a bag in here.
Yeah, no, well, got to bring bags somewhere. This is either going to be bad radio or terrible radio. We'll find out in a moment.
Oh my God.
Is there anything you want to say while I rifle through a bag for a prop I may not have?
I just want, please don't cut this long pause.
Not a pause.
Please don't cut.
I'm actively searching for something.
I do.
know I'm going to find it the second I'm done.
No. I do want to say, before we recorded this, we started recording and then we were stopped by our producer because both of us had not eaten lunch. And our producer, Keith Cornerluck, told us to eat a granola bar.
Basically, like we can tell.
100%. And so I went out and, of course, announced it to all staff. And our editor, Japneet, was like, that's so dad-coded that he made you eat a granola bar. And I feel better. I can tell I'm better.
I like that you not only announced it to staff, but that you then announced it on the podcast, including the detail where you also announced it to staff. So just so everyone's really clear on what's going on. I can't find my little Sanofi scientist guy. They had ducks. They had these little ducks from, I don't even remember if it was WFH or I think it was HFA.
Oh.
They almost look like the science fair lab coat, beaker, little scientist duck.
Like rubber duckies?
Like rubber duckies. And today, as I was leaving the house, I was like, I'm bringing that to the office. Maybe I'll have it with me while we record the podcast.
And now you don't know where it is.
It's probably in my bag, but since I couldn't find it and searched for a solid minute, we got to let it go now.
Please leave this in.
I don't have anything better to provide. This is the content.
This is amazing.
This is the content. So that's what's going on with me.
Terrific
I'm looking
content.
for toys to bring to work that I can't find in the moment. So that's what's going on with you, Amy Board. How are you?
I have nothing cooler than a Sanofi Science duck.
You don't?
Okay, so I do. I'm getting married this month.
You are.
I know, it's like a big deal. We haven't talked about it really, but I'm getting married. And we're having a big to-do. And in June, in the June episode, I'll tell you how it went.
How are you feeling about it in the May episode?
Actually, I'm feeling great. It's knock on wood, almost like everything feels done and ready and it's fine. So I've had multiple flip outs, as one does. And I think it's going to be fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who are you marrying? Good point. We don't need to get lost in the
He's
details.
been on the show. His name is Rob Bradford. He is our COO here at Believe Limited, and he's our Energizer bunny. He's the one that tells us what to do and when to do it.
That is true.
That is very true. He tells the two of us many times when we should do things.
And you enjoy it so much you want to wed yourself to that.
Yes, I can tell you that he plans all of our trips. And
mine too.
My future husband books me and Patrick's travel.
That's true. Thanks, Rob.
He's a terrific travel booker.
It's also true.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And it'll be nice to hear about it and your experience of it and the honeymoon and the thereafter. Where are you going for your honeymoon?
We're going to Norway and to Svalbard, not Svalbard. I say Svalbard and Rob makes fun of me. It's incorrect. It's Svalbard.
I've heard of neither.
Great. It's a little baby island that's the most northern point before you reach the Arctic Circle. And there's polar bears there. I don't know if we're going to see a polar bear, but we're going to attempt to see a polar bear.
Rob wants a picture of a polar bear coming out of this
100%.
No doubt about that.
It's going to be great. I bought a big coat. A big coat, everybody.
Well, we will hear more about that next month, but let's move into hearing about Paul McLaughlin, an elite athlete with hemophilia, who will close out our Elite Athletes with Hemophilia segment, at least for now. And this is a segment that has been made possible by Sanofi, who seeks to expand the idea of what's possible for the hemophilia community. Take a deeper look at the science behind hemophilia and an important connection between factor activity levels and potential activities at levelsmatter.com.
This time on Redefining Impossible, the podcast, we explore the nuanced world of hemophilia care through the eyes of Paul McLaughlin, a clinical specialist physiotherapist who's not only witnessed, but also shaped the evolution of care in hemophilia, particularly as it intersects with athleticism and physical activity. From on-demand treatment to advanced prophylaxis, he's seen firsthand how new therapies have transformed lives, enabling feats of physical endurance once deemed unthinkable. Hemophilia severity is determined by factor activity levels, a measurement of how much factor you have in your blood at the time of diagnosis. The more factor you have in your body over time, the better your bleed protection is, which is why many people with hemophilia choose to treat prophylactically. Your doctor can perform measurements to evaluate the factor activity levels in your blood. Learn more about the importance of factor activity levels by talking to your doctor and visiting levelsmatter.com.
My name is Paul McLaughlin. I am a clinical specialist physiotherapist based at the Royal Free Hospital in London. And I've been working in haemophilia for 18 years now. And my work is mainly with adults and older adults living with haemophilia and other bleeding disorders.
Paul's career has been a testament to the dynamic interplay between medical innovation and the expanding ambitions of those living with hemophilia. From on-demand treatment to advanced prophylaxis, he's seen firsthand how new therapies have transformed lives, enabling feats of physical endurance once deemed unthinkable. In the realm of sports, where physical limits are pushed and boundaries are routinely broken, a new type of athlete has emerged: those who have hemophilia and compete at elite levels. These individuals, equipped with determination and modern medical advances, are defying long-held perceptions about their limitations. Gone are the days when a diagnosis of hemophilia confined one to the sidelines, watching others achieve athletic greatness. Today, these athletes run marathons, play soccer, or even engage in mixed martial arts, turning what was once considered impossible into a new reality. Their journeys are not just about physical prowess, but also about pioneering a new understanding of what it means to live with a bleeding disorder. They challenge both the body and the medical community's understanding of hemophilia, expanding the scope of what's achievable. This story of resilience and breakthrough provides a vivid backdrop as we delve into the world of Paul McLaughlin, a physiotherapist who's dedicated nearly 2 decades to helping individuals with hemophilia navigate this challenging yet rewarding landscape.
So I've been in haemophilia a long time, 18 years, and I think athleticism, I suppose, in itself is not unique. I suppose what we're dealing with really now is the novelty of having people with haemophilia pushing the boundaries of pro athleticism and pro sport and very high levels of sporting or physical activity that we traditionally haven't seen before.
It's not just the physical aspects that Paul manages, but the holistic challenges that come with higher activity levels in hemophiliacs, a task that involves careful risk management and setting realistic expectations both for the patients and the medical community.
The challenge is risk management and safety at the very sort of basic level if we're talking about bleed and injury. And I think then the challenge also the expectation management, both of us and the people pushing the boundaries, because for many of us, we don't know what people are capable of until we do it.
In his extensive career, Paul has also had to navigate through varied perceptions within the medical community regarding what is safe and advisable for hemophiliacs.
Historically, it's maybe perhaps challenging perceptions as well, and I think, certainly in my experience, I think that's been one of the harder things to work with, has been perhaps not all clinicians think the same, and not all clinicians maybe necessarily agree that people with haemophilia should be doing sporting activities or physical activities or being pro athletes due to the perceived risk of injury or the perceived risk of bleeding. And I think sometimes that then can be negatively challenging, where people may not feel supported to do what they want to do by virtue of the fact that old ways of thinking or old ways of viewing haemophilia still permeate through the sort of the advice given or the reticence to advice given, perhaps.
Yet, Paul remains a steadfast advocate for his patients' ambitions, believing in the power of modern treatment to support more active and fulfilling lives.
We want you to live your best life and do this, but we want you to take care when you do this, or we think this is a bit unsafe, or this might be dangerous. And that's based on nothing other than, yes, it was dangerous 40 years ago when treatment wasn't as good. So I think, yeah, there are good challenges and bad challenges, but I think the good challenges are good. They're showing the success of treatment and the fact that these are things that are going to become more and more every day as we have a generation of kids becoming young adults and becoming adults who will be and should be able to consider a career in pro sport or pro athletics. And yeah, I think it's good as clinicians that we're constantly challenged with that as well.
With his profound expertise, Paul helps his patients navigate the complexities of engaging in high-level sports, blending his deep knowledge of physiotherapy with a practical understanding of hemophilia management.
A bleed is a bleed. Whether or not you're a very athletic person with hemophilia or a Joe Average with hemophilia who goes to the gym but actually does what would be considered normal or routine type of physical activity. I don't know. I think that acute bleed management or potentiating risk is probably the thing that differentiates the two. Somebody who's highly active and highly sporting against the average person with hemophilia. And I think the challenge, I suppose, is that we don't quite have the sort of research literature to back up some of the advice that we're given. We're choosing pieces from sports medicine research literature that fits best with the people we have now with hemophilia.
And as hemophilia care continues to evolve, so too does the role of clinicians, like Paul, who must constantly adapt to new therapies and treatments that push the boundaries of what's possible in hemophilia care.
Going from standard half-life to extended half-life to non-factor therapies has pushed the boundaries of better hemostatic coverage, and I think the landscape of being covered hemostatically has removed the fear issue for some people.
Through Paul McLaughlin's dedicated efforts, we see not just a chronicle of medical progress, but a vibrant narrative of human resilience. His work reminds us of the incredible capacity to overcome, to transform limitations into milestones, and to redefine the very essence of possibility. This has been Redefining Impossible, the podcast, where extraordinary stories inspire us to expand the horizons of our own potential, one challenge at a time. And as we close this segment, we reflect on the profound journey of elite athletes with hemophilia and the transformative support from dedicated professionals like Paul McLaughlin. Their stories are not just tales of personal triumphs, but also beacons for the hemophilia community, showcasing the incredible possibilities that arise when determination meets cutting-edge medical support. Through their endeavors, they redefine the landscape of what can be achieved, inspiring not just those with hemophilia, but all of us, to challenge the perceived limits of our capabilities. This narrative of resilience and innovation continues to evolve, promising even greater achievements in the realms of sports and beyond. Thanks for listening to the 10th and final segment of Redefining Impossible, the podcast. Remember, you can always watch the film Redefining Impossible for free at EliteAthletesWithHemophilia.com. And special thanks to Sanofi for sponsoring this segment. I'm Keith Corneluk, and now back to the Bloodstream Podcast.
Oh, a fantastic final segment for our elite athletes. Thank you, Paul. As a reminder, Sanofi aims to raise the bar for patients living with hemophilia. Reimagine what's possible by visiting rareblood.disorders.com to hear more about Sanofi's dedication to the bleeding disorder community.
And shout out as well to our producer and lunch manager, Keith Corneluk, who produced each of those segments for
and crushed. They're gorgeous.
They're really gorgeous. If you haven't seen the video version, if you're an audio only podcast listener, I would recommend checking out Bloodstream Media's social media handles to see the video segments from the Elite Athlete segment. We do video segments of various segments, but the Elite Athlete ones are of a particular elevation and worthy of being checked out. So thank you, Keith,
because
for all
of
those.
Keith.
Because of Keith.
He's an artist.
Speaking of artists, I don't know. Shellye's probably an artist.
Probably.
In her own right.
Oh,
she
for
definitely
sure.
is. And, she probably made a
She
craft.
wears red eyeglasses.
That's a great point. So Shellye, with the red eyeglasses. Shellye Horowitz, a passionate community advocate and for a time a real figurehead with the Hemophilia Federation of America, who was a part of their Mild Matters program. You mentioned it a little bit at the top. We're going to hear a bunch more here from Shellye. But Amy, just give us one more time, quick overview. What is Mild Matters exactly, and why are we talking about it?
Shellye gives us a terrific overview about this program that comes out of the Hemophilia Federation of America, HFA, specifically on mild hemophilia. And a lot of it is research-based, and a lot of it is working with HTCs and clinicians, not only patient programming. So it's really fantastic, and we'll hear more from Shellye right now. Listeners, we're back with darling dearest Shellye, who is going to be with us on the podcast today. How are you, love?
I am doing well, and I am so excited to be here with you and get a moment to chat with you. This is good.
I know you've been working on something that I know is such a personal passion for you, and it is a relatively new initiative here in the community. And so this is our opportunity to talk about it. So Shellye, tell us everything. Tell us everything about Mild Matters and what you're doing and what the project and the initiative is.
I am so excited, and I will try to tell you everything without talking your ear off. It is definitely a passion project of mine, without a doubt. And it actually started over 2 years ago when I was hired at HFA. And we were looking at all the different ways we can really support and serve the community. And we were doing so much work for women, and we were making great strides. And of course, there's still a long way to go, as we know, but we were getting somewhere, right? And I started listening when I was at events, and I realized that there were things that weren't lining up. So, for example, when you look at milds with hemophilia A and B who are being seen at HTCs, when you dive into that community counts data, what I found was 19% of the milds seen at HTCs were women, but 80 to 90% of the milds with hemophilia A and B showing up at all of our events were women. So there was this huge disconnect. And I realized that the mild men were gone. They were off the radar. We'd get, on occasion, a mild man or two in our midst, but as a whole, they were gone. And I started talking to HTCs, and I was like, what's going on? They're like, yeah, we can't get them into the comprehensive clinic visits either. We're missing them. And I realized as I backed up that there was this gaping hole. And if we would widen that net, to include milds, we would capture most of the women, not all. We do have some women who are moderate and severe. We have some women who have severe types of von Willebrand disease and rare factor deficiencies. But for the most part, if we widen the net, we would capture most of the women and also have an opportunity to bring in these mild men who were off the radar with mild hemophilia, with mild rare factor deficiencies, with VWD. So it was really an opportunity to include more people and be more inclusive. So that's how it started. And then it just kept growing. And one of the things that really came up right away was equity issues just across the board. So we, in 2022, we had our first gathering where we brought together representatives from 3 groups. We brought together mild men, mild women, and parents of mild children to start talking about the struggles. We felt like we had an okay handle on the struggles that the women were facing, not that they were getting as far as we want them to get in terms of access to diagnosis and treatment, but we felt like we could define that problem. And for the most part, we could define the men's problems too. They were also struggling to access treatment. They were really frustrated that they couldn't self-infuse. And they just really felt like they weren't being heard or taken seriously. What we hadn't anticipated were the responses we received from parents. And parents really started bringing up equity issues. They would say, my child with mild hemophilia was sent to camp and they met this severe who's on prophy and playing contact sports, playing basketball, playing soccer. And my child is told that they need to not play these sports because they're not as protected, right? So the severe would be brought up to say 100% factor right before a game and was able to play, while a mild with maybe 20-30% factor was told no sports for you. So that was a really big divide we saw, and a point of contention among parents, right? Like, what about my kid? They should be able to play too. So we found that really fascinating and eye-opening, and it made a lot of sense. And then adults were saying, well, wait, we want to be active too. How can we as milds be active? And when you look at kind of the history and the evolution of individuals with mild bleeding disorders, for years, right? Women went from being symptomatic carriers to actually being recognized as having disease. That struggle is still a little hard because if a woman's factor levels with hemophilia in particular are above 40, they are still labeled symptomatic carrier, and those below 40 are labeled mild hemophilia. So we haven't hit it yet, and we know that factor levels don't necessarily even correlate with bleeding tendencies, but we're getting closer. And I think part of the reason that we've seen a big jump in getting closer is the fact that so many severes have gone on prophylaxis that have rendered them mild. And as the severes have been rendered mild, and lo and behold, they're still getting bleeds, it's given credibility to all the milds who have said for years, really, we're bleeding, like pay attention to us. And I think it took the severes being treated and still ending up with bleeds on occasion to give that credibility to all the milds who are saying, no, really, our factor levels aren't high enough to prevent bleeds. We are struggling. So that's kind of a quick history.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to talk more about the events and what we've done, but I think that's a quick get you to this point. Sorry if I talked.
No, that's really cool. Like, as you have identified some of these, gaps in education and awareness and treatment, and kind of the standards of care, what did your team at HFA set out to do about it? And this could kind of go into some of the events that you guys have had, but tell us a little bit about the journey towards action, about what you guys wanted to do.
Absolutely. Empowerment, education and empowerment are the things that we want to do.
And so much acknowledgement too, like acknowledging, like even just having a thing is so important. So anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, I love that. I actually love that you did, because it is that validity means so much. Having someone
Yeah.
say to you, you're not crazy, this isn't in your head, I think that can be as healing sometimes as even moving towards accessing treatment, just knowing that you're not alone and that these issues are real. And what we did is after we had that first event where we really listened, we wanted to flip it to an event where we could offer practical suggestions, advice, education. And that's what we did with our 2023 patient event. And we really looked at providing tools to patients so that they could walk in to their provider and say, hey, here's my patient's story. I think that we're not communicating well. And I truly believe that part of the reason milds aren't getting their needs met is because there's this disconnect. So what I think I'm describing as my patient bleeding experience may not be aligning with what the provider is hearing. So we're missing it. So we talked about things like creating bleeding logs, and we gave bleeding logs. By the way, there's a little push for that. You can find them on our website. We have some phenomenal former staff members who spent hours and hours developing these logs and creating a phenomenal resource to our community. So that can be found on our website, and individuals can track menstrual bleeding. They can track other bleeds, and it gives an opportunity to start creating some sort of paper trail for physicians. And we really encourage that these then be uploaded into patient provider communication systems like a MyChart if they have that. The other thing we really encouraged is to photograph anything you possibly can. And I tell a story at these events of an elbow bleed that I had. And I called this really sympathetic nurse, and she was like, hey, what's going on? I was like, I bumped my elbow and there's a bleed. And she starts asking me these questions that were the right questions to ask. She's like, how big is it? Well, I have a small elbow. So it was like maybe like an inch by an inch. And then she asks, how big is the swelling? I'm like, I don't know, like a half an inch. And then she asked, well, is it black and blue? And I was like, no. And she asked me, well, can you bend it? I'm like, yes, but it's stiff and it hurts. And I know that what she was picturing in her head was not the bleed picture I ended up showing, which was very, very clearly a hematoma under my skin that very clearly needed factor treatment. And the minute you see the picture, there's no doubt, you know there's a bleed. But the speaking back and forth, something got lost in the communication. And I think it was on both parts, because she was asking the right questions and I felt like I was answering them, but it wasn't translating in that communication to she has a bleed that needs to be treated. And I think that if we can strengthen that communication and that understanding of the patient's story, we can get to like diagnosis and treatment faster. And that's really my goal personally, and HFAs as well, when it comes to education. How can we empower patients to gather this data so that they won't be turned away accidentally? Because I really think a lot of these HTCs don't even mean to. The other thing that we talked a lot about is not presenting it as a problem patient. Like if we come in angry, and a lot of us have a right to be angry, but if we come in angry, we don't necessarily get that far, and doctors can get defensive. I know when I was a former school principal, I got defensive when I was a school principal and people came at me in anger. So we really encourage them to try to move themselves to being the patient with the medical problem versus the problem patient, and really working at defining that medical problem in a way that the MDs or HCPs can hear us without immediately going into a defensive, if that makes sense. Does that make
That
sense?
makes total sense. Shellye, that's great. No, it totally does. You mentioned a little bit, HFA has gone through restructuring, and I think there's some questions still that the community might have. And so tell me a little bit about this program's longevity and health. Do you feel good and sturdy within HFA's backing?
I feel like HFA is really taking an opportunity right now to step back, as many organizations do in times of growth, and say, let's look at what has the most impact for the greatest amount of people in our community. I know one of the things that our CEO has said multiple times is that one of his concerns is that there are, I think, over 1 million people with VWD, for example, who aren't even on the radar. And I have to say, when I personally think of people with mild bleeding disorders, I am definitely worried about all the women and men in our midst who we know of who aren't getting the treatment they need. And I am absolutely terrified of all the men and women in our midst who don't even know that they have a bleeding disorder and even should be on a radar. And they are in more danger showing up at an ER than those of us who are still screaming for treatment, but we at least know to scream, right? We know to stand up for ourselves. And there are arguably potentially over 1 million people who don't. And I know that that has been expressed as a concern. And the question is, as we reorganize and we restructure, how do we reach the individual people who aren't on our radar? How do we connect maybe with different social service organizations? How do we find a way to get this message out to the greater community? And I know that there are lots of ideas, not just at HFA, but also when we met just a week and a half ago with physicians from HTCs across the United States and talked about mild issues, they also said, how do we reach OBGYNs? How do we reach primary care physicians and PAs and nurse practitioners and dentists who are often that first line of communication and get individuals on the radar? So I think right now we have more questions than answers, but I do feel like we're asking the right questions. We're definitely recognizing that there is an issue, and part of restructuring allows an organization to step back and say, how can we meet needs in new ways? And sometimes, we need to restructure to do that, even though it can be painful.
Well said, pal. Well said. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing more about this. This has just been wonderful. I guess to kind of wrap us up, tell me a little bit, and our listeners, about what is on the horizon for Mild Matters this year. What's going to happen at Symposium, and what's coming down the pipe in 2024?
So first, I just have to say, if you let me cut me off. First, what I really want to say is that I have to give kudos. We had 25 HTC hematologists from 17 states and Puerto Rico who gave their time to gather with us in Tulsa, Oklahoma from February 7th to the 9th to really start to address some of the issues that patients are facing. So we took all of that patient input and we said to the providers, here's what we're hearing. What can we do? And they had didactic sessions and they broke out into peer groups and they started discussing really critical issues like timing of testing of infant boys and infant girls, because we found that there was a lag, that infant girls tended to be tested, particularly when at risk for hemophilia A or B. They tended to be tested later on than infant boys, which of course makes no sense, because an infant girl at risk for bleeding, we want to know their factor levels. We want that medic alert bracelet on their wrist if they end up in a car accident at age 1 or 2 to say that they can be tested, sometimes before menstruation, doesn't make sense when it comes to protecting them in an emergency. So we talked about those sorts of issues. We talked about the use of prophylaxis when appropriate for sports or other issues when the bleeding indicates it. So it's not, they weren't saying that every mild is going to be put on prophylaxis, and surely every mild doesn't need it. There's a treatment burden. However, there are individuals who are struggling with bleeding and they might need access to, and prophylaxis, by the way, doesn't just mean factor. It means any product that helps with bleeding, right? So tranexamic acid, DDAVP, these other things in our toolkit, even hormonal therapy in an essence could be a prophylactic treatment. It's something you take to prevent the bleeding, right? And for some, that may mean access to factor products all the time. For some, it may mean while they're menstruating or before sports or just during a sports season, but looking at how we can be open to that when appropriate and when the bleeding seems to indicate it. We also had, I'm going to give a shout out to Dr. Mira Chitler. She is amazing. She's a pediatrician in Michigan who has been a strong supporter, and she gave a presentation to the other providers that was fantastic. And she was asking the question, are we accepting the same things for milds as we are for severes? So as we've rendered severes mild, we ask the question, how many bleeds are too many bleeds? And when you look at some of the research, you see that we try to get to 0 bleeds for severes, but we may be accepting 1 or 2 bleeds a year or more in mild. So there's this question of equity in what we're willing to accept. And shouldn't that be the same? If we really want severes to not experience bleeds because we believe it's healthier for them and their joints long term, should it be the same for milds? And I think it's a good question that we need to ask ourselves. Are we really getting everyone to the same point? Another question that came up as we gathered the physicians is if with the new novel therapies that increases that trough level. So say an individual with hemophilia A might end their week at 15 or 20% factor before they have their next infusion because some of the new therapies, or they may be held at a more consistent state because of some of the therapies. What are we doing for milds who may have those lower levels, right? They may be at the lower end of mild from 6 to 15%. It could be that we now have milds who are actually being left at trough levels lower than our severes. So all great questions. And I think these are all things that we're going to continue to debate as we move forward. And the physicians are interested. They want to engage. They want to know how to help out. And they want to gather that information. They want to understand more about that bleeding story, see the photos of the bleeds, understand what's going on. So I envision as we move forward that we're going to somehow miraculously figure out how to reach the many individuals not on the radar at all, pull them in, get them the education they need so that they're not the woman who shows up at the ER in a rural town who doesn't understand they have a bleeding disorder and whose ER docs aren't equipped to even begin to understand that there may be more there. How do we reach those men and women? I don't think we have the answers yet, but I know we're asking the questions. And then how do we work with the physicians to make sure that then these individuals have that landing space that they need to get to the qualified providers at HTCs and really get the help that they need. And I will also say, I know sometimes we get so frustrated with providers as a community, and I think that we have to step back and acknowledge our providers are so overworked. They're understaffed. We know that many of the hematology oncology fellowships went unfilled this year. And we know that there are HTCs who have been advertising for adult hematologists, for example, for a long time, even over a year or more, and they're not getting the providers. So on one hand, we're talking about over 1 million people with VWD that we need to funnel to the HTCs. Then there's also this question of, are we going to drown the providers because we're not necessarily finding them? Individuals who go into hematology, oncology is pretty enticing when it often comes with higher salaries and I feel like we need to just give a huge screaming thank you to the providers who are in our community, because they're choosing to go into classical hematology and work with all of us, and they're often doing it in centers that aren't necessarily staffed to the levels that they want them to be. And they're taking on a lot of stress, and they're working an incredible amount of hours to help us, right? It's amazing.
Right. Shellye, fantastic points, and just such a important, timely initiative. This is so exciting. Tell listeners where folks can hear more about Mild Matters through HFA, maybe website or some other platforms.
Definitely go to HFA's website, and I think that that's probably the absolute best place to find resources, and that's hemophiliafed.org. And number one, that's where I would say head over to there and reach out. Come to Symposium. Every year at Symposium, we do a Mild Matters wrap session where we chat, and then we also do a Mild Matters, we just have different didactic sessions that are available as well.
Shellye, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us a little bit more. We'll make sure to have you back to get updates as we go along. This is wonderful. Thank you, pal.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you, Shellye. And as the father of a young woman, a girl of age 3, with mild hemophilia, I very much appreciate the work that Shellye and others are doing to bring more light to the needs and consequences of mild hemophilia.
Yes.
The Mild Matters program from HFA, you can learn more about it by visiting hemophiliafed.org/mild-matters. And we'll have a link in the program notes as well. So thank you, Shellye, for all you do and for telling us about the Mild Matters program. For our last segment, I'm Fine. I'm Fine aims to challenge entrenched ideas around chronic resiliency, which I have to say, I feel like since we've started this segment, and this has been so top of mind for me, the amount of times that I feel as though chronic resiliency, that I'm now aware of it, and the way in which it holds people back from being open to some new possibility or opportunity, I just am personally thanks Sanofi. I'm personally grateful we're doing this because it reminds me time and time again that while I want to feel resilient and strong, if you get too firm and too stubborn, it's hard to learn new things. It's hard to change your ways. It's hard to be open to new opportunities. So I am grateful that we are continuing to put this conversation in the forefront. I'm Fine aims to challenge entrenched ideas around chronic resiliency and satisfaction with suboptimal outcomes by inspiring people with hemophilia to seek education and truly consider the possibilities. Sanofi seeks to expand the idea of what's possible for the hemophilia community. You can take a deeper look at the science behind hemophilia and an important connection between factor activity levels and potential activities at levelsmatter.com. Now, on to I'm Fine.
This is all I've ever known. Is that even
possible for me?
I don't want to miss anything.
I don't need that. I don't want to acknowledge my pain.
Fine.
I don't want to get poked with needles.
I don't want that.
There's nothing wrong.
I'm fine.
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 So, you've identified that you're not fine. That gnawing voice in the back of your mind that maybe there's something more for my life is always there. Maybe I don't have to accept that this is just the way that it is. My pain levels, my treatment regimens, my lifestyle choices. Maybe I'm not fine. So you take a step in a different direction. You make a choice for your life that leads to progress. Everything should be fixed, right? But what if it isn't? What if progress only leads to an unfortunate discovery of another issue? Maybe an issue that you haven't paid attention to before. Stifling pain in one ankle, only to realize the other ankle was probably in pain the entire time. Today we talk to our host and my bud, Patrick Lynch, about just that. Hi, PJL. Welcome to the hot seat for I'm Fine.
Oh, my goodness. Hello. It's the same seat I'm in for the rest of the podcast,
I know.
but it feels significantly more
Hotter.
uncomfortable
Okay,
right now.
great. Okay, so you've been transparent with us about your journey, contemplating the I'm fine mindset. You've also been very transparent about your chronic pain in your left ankle in particular. And last year, you had incredible progress with your left ankle. So share a little bit about that journey, just kind of as a wrap up, if people maybe haven't heard about what happened last December with your ankle journey.
The TLDR, when I was 12, I was told you have end-stage arthritis. So I knew from a young age that arthritis and issues with my left ankle were going to present and at some point come to a head of some kind. And in the last few years, my daily experience of pain, the surges of pain at night or after pronounced activity just got to be unbearable. So I eventually got to the point of saying, oh, okay, I'm not fine. I'm no longer trying to just be resilient forever. I need help. Didn't know what that meant, wanted to avoid surgery at all costs, got cortisone injections, platelet-rich plasma injections, eventually had a debridement, had my ankle cleared out, had some bone spurs removed. I tiptoed my way toward the more invasive surgical remedies for hemophilic arthropathy in a 38-year-old male who was told 25 plus years ago, you have end-stage arthritis. So December of 2023, December 1st, I had a left ankle fusion following a long series of consultations and a second opinion and contemplation about ankle replacement, conversations with other guys with hemophilia who have had replacements, who have had fusions. And in short, for the 5 months since then, it's been absolutely life-changing for the left side of my body.
What a cliffhanger!
Well, that's why we're here, right?
I don't even have to go into my, peppered question. So, what happened with the right ankle?
Yeah, so I had a fair amount of bleeding into my right ankle as well. As a kid, I have hemophilic arthropathy in that ankle as well. I've been told by doctors looking at images of my right ankle as well for as long as I can remember, like, woof, you're not in pain? You don't? Okay. And what the last few months have made abundantly clear is that while my left ankle was, like an 8 out of 10 in pain, the right is still like a 4 or a 5. It's like not great. And actually, Mother's Day in real time as we're recording this was just this past Sunday. And Vivian and I Natalie had a surf lesson down at El Porto Beach, and we went to cheer her on and hang out. And, just the walk from where we parked, it was a downhill slope and down some stairs down to the beach. By the time we got to the beach and settled, I was in such pain and discomfort, and I'm writhing around on the blanket, and I'm trying not to really say anything about it or exhibit too much physical discomfort because I don't want Vivian to be concerned about her dad, and Natalie's in the water, can't do anything. There's nothing to do. But I was frustrated. I was really frustrated because I just walked for 5 minutes, and yet whatever was going on with me, there was enough inflammation, there was enough pain that by the time I actually stopped moving, it was pretty bad. And I was like, okay, I have to be honest. My right ankle I'm not fine on the right ankle either. So yeah, what I did to address the left was urgent, necessary, and has been life-changing. The work's not done. It has uncovered the calm in my left ankle and on the left side of my body has made abundantly and undeniably clear the true level of pain and disturbance that I experience from my right ankle. So now I need to decide how I want to go about addressing that.
Take me through a little bit of the frustration angle and how that's been over the last several months. As we're talking about behavior change, we're talking about mindset. I remember when you came back from that left ankle surgery, you had a light on in your eyes.
Yeah.
It was very different. And it was post-op. It was like you should have had, post-op surgery pain. You were alive. And what has it been like to still experience pain in a way that maybe had been clouded before? What has that kind of done to your spirit?
Yeah, it's made it a more complicated time at the summit, so to speak. Okay, I'm done with the surgery. The surgery was followed by 3 months of first non-weight bearing, then very minimal weight bearing and toe touching and 25% weight. I'm crawling around my house. I'm doing more crawling in my house than I've done since I'm like 2 years old. I'm starting to get pains in my wrists and elbows. I'm like, I don't think this is a good idea. I'm peeing into buckets. I'm like, all right, come on. What are we doing here? So it wasn't like an immediate shift into freedom of movement. So I'm like, all right, I got to get through this period of recovery. It's going to still be a few months. I'm not in pain, but I can't move around. Then I could move around again. But I got this right ankle situation, and, look, in the interest of more transparent discussion, I put on a lot of weight last year, too. Some of that has to do with the ankle and frustrations and lack of mobility, and some of it's just whatever else. But the bottom line is that's all the more pain and pressure on the weight-bearing joint. So, now I'm significantly heavier as I'm back to moving around again, and my left ankle's feeling pretty good, but the right ankle pretty immediately is screaming at me. So what has it been like? It sort of has felt a little bit like delayed gratification of sorts. Like 2 days after the surgery, I was out of pain and thought it was the best thing ever. But then, I got months of rehab or, getting back on my feet again to experience. I'm on the other side of that, but now I got this other ankle issue on the other side that feels as though it's still preventing me from enjoying the freedom of movement and life on the other side of surgery that I was hoping for. Not because the surgery didn't do everything it was supposed to do, but because there's other stuff to be done that I wasn't as cognizant of when there was a more urgent matter to address.
Last question. Can you put some words to, some words of encouragement if there are other blood brothers or blood sisters experiencing the same thing who are maybe drowning in their frustration about something like this?
Yeah, I've been there too. I mean, drowning in frustration to me is a signal to like reach out to somebody, like call somebody, just, get someone else's point of view. It was very helpful talking about it on Bloodstream and having a lot of people respond to me talking about this on Bloodstream, getting texts and DMs and stuff about like, hey, I just had a fusion. Hey, I'm thinking about this. That helped a lot. It helped both for the informational piece as well as the social piece. I literally learned more. But in process, I also just felt more connected to other people who were, toggling their version of, if not the same, a similar consideration.
You're not alone.
You're not alone. Like, you might be frustrated, but you're not alone. So be frustrated if you are. Just don't isolate. There are other people who can hear what you're saying, identify with it, and maybe, just maybe, have some good information for you too. Amy, it's interesting too, this idea of the left ankle correction highlighting the true state of pain and need in the right ankle reminds me a little bit of some of the conversations of late that older guys with hemophilia are subject to. The complications of aging with hemophilia. Oddly enough, if you have hemophilia, you're at lower risk for heart disease because, fun fact, our blood has trouble clotting. But if you have somebody who then has pre-existing considerations for heart disease, or then all of a sudden you're having to toggle like, wait a minute, okay, I want to make sure that my blood can clot, but I don't want it to overclot because of this heart disease thing. And by treating your hemophilia, as Dr. Pipe said in a session during HFA Symposium this year, in a way you kind of unmask true potential underlying conditions for heart disease. And it's not what you're trying to do by treating hemophilia, but it's like, look, that's what's already there. It just so happens that this deficiency elsewhere was sort of like covering for that. But if we solve for the deficiency, it's no longer covering for that other thing. So now you have to address that other thing. It's just another version of, as we put out the big fire, the little fire still remains. So I think for all of us, whether it's corrective surgery, aging, whatever part of the life cycle we're on, it's just good to remember that like I'm fine is not a before after. It's a complex progression of addressing challenges only to uncover new ones that yet to be addressed. And I don't think that process ever really stops.
Thank you, Patrick, for sharing your journey with us, as always. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another segment of I'm Fine. Maybe the aftermath of progress can teach us that healing is not just about fixing the physical ailment. It's about nurturing the mind, body, and spirit. It's about finding strength in vulnerability and courage in adversity. But most importantly, it's about embracing the journey wherever it may lead. We'll catch you next time on the next I'm Fine. Listeners, Sanofi aims to raise the bar for patients living with hemophilia. Reimagine what's possible by visiting rareblood.disorders.com to hear more about Sanofi's dedication to the bleeding disorder community.
Thank you, Shellye. Thank you, Paul. Thank you to everybody who contributed to today's episode of the Bloodstream Podcast, which of course would not be possible without our presenting sponsor, Takeda.
Yeah.
Visit bleedingdisorders.com to learn more. And thanks as well again to Sanofi for their support of I'm Fine and the Elite Athletes segments. Visit rareblood.disorders.com to learn more from Sanofi. Amy Board, you're getting married, and then there's going to be another podcast episode.
Yes.
Everything happens, and then there's a podcast episode
Yes.
on June 14th. What can listeners expect to hear then?
Well, I haven't heard your interview, but you do. You have a conversation with Thomas Bartlett, who has a rare disease. Do you remember?
He has myasthenia gravis, or MA, and June is Myasthenia Gravis Awareness Month. And so we thought it would be a good opportunity to bring Tom on to talk about what it means to have an invisible rare disease. So you'll be hearing that next on June 14th. And with that, that is all for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Bloodstream Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts to have the next episode delivered to you the moment it goes live.
And y'all, as always, mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com is the email address to use to inquire about casting opportunities for podcasts, for films.
Anything. There's always like 5 things
There's
going
like
on.
some things coming up, so let us know. And you can find me or PJL on social media. You can also ping us on Bloodstream Media's social media. We are very responsive. So bug us.
And Bloodstream Media's social media is where you can check out each segment of the Elite Athletes segment, the video version that is, by checking out
Yes.
Bloodstream Media on social media.
Shout out Keith Corneluk, producer, artist,
Rock star. That's
Dad
what that last.
coded.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that and until next time, I am your host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your other host, Amy Board.
Take self-care of yourself. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.